Hi, thank you very much for joining us for this month's Cura Chat. We're very excited to meet with Claudia. But before we give an introduction to Claudia, I just want to give a few minutes overview on Cura. For those of you who are joining for the first time, Cura is a platform to help launch and grow your early career. We are first generation, my co-founder and I, Sylvia, we're first generation Latinas, and the early career process was a little bit challenging, to say the least, to navigate. So we're building a community, inviting like-minded people, growth-minded people, ambitious spirits to join us and help figure out the early career process together. We have speakers that join us once a month, and the speakers oftentimes tell their authentic journeys and give us some practical tips. What we really appreciate is the nuances and the hows to get things done, not just the whats, and not just the lofty goals, and not just when you make it to the senior level ranks. You know, we want to hear the real journeys. So thank you so much to this month's speaker, Claudia. We met her through a connection at Digital Nest. Really love seeing the partners come together and uplift different stories and bring different people together. Excited to jump in and learn a little bit more. Before we start, Claudia, do you just want to give a brief overview on who you are?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to all the participants for your time and sharing it with us. So yes, my name is Claudia Vialta. I am a sustainability professional. I'm a consultant right now. I grew up in Watsonville, California, and I went to school in Long Beach, at Cal State Long Beach, and I worked in the film industry at Sony Pictures, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I had a sustainability specialist. I was a sustainability specialist there. And yeah, now I'm an environmental consultant. So that's kind of been the through line of my career is environmental sustainability. So happy to meet all of you.
That's amazing, Claudia. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just have to ask you because my parents growing up only thought that there was three career paths, right? Doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Sustainability did not make the list in our family conversations. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you know about work and sustainability, and what was your passion to ignite that interest there?
Yes, same here. I very much saw careers as linear, as very categorical and separate and doctor, lawyer, that kind of thing. But I guess where it all started is growing up. I grew up mostly with a single mom. She didn't work, so we didn't have a lot of resources. So from a very young age, I've always been very mindful and considerate of conserving resources, and that, just financial, but also um, things that are connected to finances, like energy and, not producing a lot of waste and not being able to afford brand new things. So I've always kind of had a mindset for conservation and for sustainability. And when I learned that it doesn't just save money, it also saves the planet, which my mom kind of fostered that as a young age. And then, I learned more in school and with friends. I thought, this is something that's like a core value for me. But at the
Mm.
time, I didn't really want to get into environmental science because it has the word science in it, and I didn't want to be a scientist. So I kind of put it on the back burner as something I've always, enjoyed learning about and talking about, but never thought it would be a career. And so I, went more towards, other passions such as interior design and production design. I've always been very attracted to Architectural Digest magazines and HGTV and home renovation. So I went to school for that. And then I came to a crossroads and I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do either. And that's when I did a lot of research and decided, a lot of soul searching, and decided, hey, that thing, environmentalism, it's always been in the back of my head and on my heart. Is there any way I can like pursue that while still holding on to my film degree? Because at that point I was like junior in college and I didn't want to start over. So with some research, I was able to find that a lot of the film studios in Hollywood and Los Angeles area have sustainability programs. So I was like, okay, jumping ship, that's what I'm gonna do. I don't know anyone in this field, in this industry, but I have a film, I'm working towards a film degree. I'm just gonna make it work. So yeah.
I love that you used research and soul searching in the same sentence. I really appreciate that. Can we double click on that? How do you go about doing both? How do you make time for both? And how did you know that both were just as important?
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm in a really cool, unique generation. I was born in 1997, so we call ourselves the Zillennials. So I feel
Mhm.
like we have this unique perspective on like careers and jobs, and we grew up like on TV and in movies and even in real life, people in the same job for decades and decades and decades, even if they're not happy with it. So I've always thought like, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that. I want to do something that feels authentic to me and something that when I get up every day, I'm excited to go to work. And when I go to sleep, I feel like, okay, this is the right thing. So I've always kind of had that mindset. And I thought I had that with like production design and interior decoration. Um, so when that wasn't quite working, I guess I'll mention, I realized that wasn't quite working when I had an internship in that industry with like a small commercial, they were like a production design house essentially. And I don't know, the work just didn't seem exactly fitting with what I wanted, the long hours and the creativity just wasn't coming super naturally to me. And so as a junior at that year, at that point when you're in college, you're like, okay, I don't want to waste my time. So it was an amalgamation of things, but always going back to like what comes natural, what comes easy, and what fuels me, like what makes me feel passionate.
I love what you just said about I knew what I didn't want. And then as you were going through your journey, the things that didn't feel good, that's information, right? And so you may not know what you want, but you know what you definitely don't want
Yeah.
because you know what
I
that feels
love
like.
that.
I love what you just said. Thank you.
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
part of the journey.
Yes, most definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we think a lot of times we'd learn just from the role models that are in front of us, right? This is what they've done, this is good, but there's a lot of power in contrast, right?
Mhm.
And being able to feel your way. And the title of our talk is about trusting your gut. How did you learn to trust your gut? What did it feel like, and how did you know that you needed to? Because especially in our culture, right, there's a lot of telling you what you need to do, right? So it's very counterintuitive. How do
Yeah.
you tune in to that voice and like, what is that voice saying?
I always tell my friends and anyone who will listen, like if it's something that scares you, you should probably lean into it because doing that soul searching and that data-driven research, like, is this even a viable industry? That was scary. That was like,
Mhm.
like we're saying, like doctor, lawyer, like all of these cut and dry jobs, leaning away from that, even something that's more known, like an interior decorator, like leaning away from that felt scary. And so I was like, ooh, this seems like there's an area for growth and development and like uniqueness. And so there was that, like
Mhm.
I think I started to grow that more so in college as I was getting older. But also I feel like I'm a pretty self-aware person. I feel like I do a lot of journaling and I'm like in touch with my feelings. So um yeah, just I think those two things, like being like knowing what's going on in my mind and being in touch with myself and also just seeing that they're like this is scary, but maybe if it's scary, it can be right. Like it feels a
Mhm.
little risky, but that's where opportunity, especially when you're really young, I feel like it's a lot easier. Your whole avenue, your whole life is ahead of you. Like you might think, oh my God, if I make one step this way, it's going to change everything. It does, but it's a lot easier to recalibrate when you're
Mhm.
younger in college, early professional. Not that it's impossible later on, but it's more difficult and a little more complicated. So why not, risk and kind of assess and be scared when you're younger?
So much wisdom in that. So you take your instinct and your intuition, and you make some of the decisions, and then walk us through the research part of how do you find out about sustainability and film, like the tactical stuff of looking at LinkedIn. Is that where you even start, or where would you go to start?
Yeah, well, I started at my desk, so unhappy. I loved the job. The people were great, but it was just the
Yeah.
environment, wasn't it? I was just at my desk. I'm like, get me out of here. So I just very simple, sustainability in film, like just those two words. And for me, that combination, that was it was instantaneous. I didn't have to dig that much. I saw Sony, Warner Brothers, Netflix, all of these in
Mm.
different degrees. Like some had full-fledged programs and departments, others were in a more infancy stage. So I was like, okay, that's it. And then the following weeks, I was just looking up who worked there, what their journeys were, who I could talk to. And from then on, I really started telling all my friends because I was in film school and I was everybody's production designer. Like all of my friends who were also in film, they were making their own short films and they would like hire me, but it was all for, class credit and experience. I started telling them like, okay, sorry, I'm not going to be your production designer anymore, but let me be your, director of sustainability. They didn't know what that was, and neither did I. But with my research, I kind of just was like, okay, other like the big studios, this is what they do. Let me just pare that down and do it for you. So I got like experience doing that and just like really marketed and branded myself. And everyone that I talked to, like at work, my friends, my professors, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm interested in. What do you think? Can you help me? Can I help you? And that's like a really big advice or big piece of advice that I like to give is like, just talk to everybody, because not only is it like, you throw the spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, like, talk to everyone, maybe they can get you a job, but it's also practice for yourself on how you speak about the industry, speaking about it. And then people have questions. Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Let me look it up. Then you have more knowledge. You have practice like branding and marketing yourself as this person. And that led to informational interviews, which is
Mm.
like a way I kind of ended up getting my job at Sony.
Can you tell us more about what are informational interviews and how do you get them?
Yes. So, and then you mentioned LinkedIn in the previous question. So I think LinkedIn is a great way to find what people's roles are. I always find that to be really interesting to see their journey of where they started, what jobs have they had. I didn't get my job that way. I did it through informational interviews. But so an informational interview is when you sit down over Zoom or over coffee. Um, Not nearly an hour, because that's a lot of time, maybe like 15 to 30 minutes with a professional or an expert in the field that you want to enter. And you're basically asking them questions about their journey, their job, what they like about their job, advice on how you can get a job in that industry. And a lot of times, they're not going to offer you, like, interview sounds like you're interviewing for a job. It's more like you're interviewing them and picking their brains.
Mhm.
And it doesn't always lead to a job, but they might remember you. And if something opens up, they might call you. Probably not. I would go into informational interviews more as a data gathering,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
definitely advices to make it worth that person's time too. Whether you have a perspective to share or something like that. So it's more of an exchange rather than like taking from them. So the people that I talked to in my circle, it was one of my managers at Cal State Long Beach in the sustainability office. She knew
Mhm.
somebody who worked at Sony, and it wasn't directly in sustainability, it was in environmental health, but kind of adjacent. And so I spoke with her, and then she was like, oh yeah, there's there's a 6 months traineeship. You should apply, and you can put on the application that you know me. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. And then that led to my job. And the funny thing is with that is I had been working at Cal State Long Beach with this manager for like a year and a half. And by that point, I kind of knew I wanted to go into sustainability and film. So she knew this, but it wasn't until like I was almost graduating that it clicked in her head. Oh, hey, I know Leslie at Sony. talk to her. So it was kind of like, what? I should have known this whole time. Nothing against her. She's wonderful. But it's just funny how sometimes you need to remind people, like you can't just say it once, like I want to be an engineer for
Mhm.
XYZ. Like you need a constant, like people need to know you as, what you want to do so that they'll remember. Because she saw me every day and I talked about it all the time. And it wasn't until a year and a half later, she's like, wait, I know someone. So
Claudia, that's so good. And also, I get reminded of this sometimes too, is like the art of just being direct, right? Like of just being direct. It's hard to figure out what you want to do, but then once you do and once you hone in on it, I think it's really helpful what you said to brand yourself with these two elements. And
mhm,
it wasn't about the title, like you weren't telling everybody you want to be an account supervisor, you want to be this, but your interests were in film and sustainability and just repeating that to whoever would listen.
yeah.
And then having that clarity to be direct
Mhm,
about that during your informational interviews is a really great model to
mhm,
do. Now, looking back through your journey and where you are in your career, um, how does that serve you now that
mhm,
you're in it?
mhm. I think, yes, totally with you on the direct part, like being
Mhm.
direct. I think it still works. Even like I'm in the industry that I want to be in, and I'm so direct with my boss on like not always like complaining like I don't like these projects, but telling her
Right.
what I do like and what I feel
Ah,
comfortable by has really served me because then like I know this is for young professionals and like marketing yourself to get that entry level job, but I'm still using that now in terms of like really honing in on what I want to like specialize and be known for. So for me right now, that's environmental compliance. So what I'm doing is I'm telling my managers and my, lateral colleagues like, hey, I really like presenting to the cities on what they need to do to comply with these ordinances and these bills, and then tell them that a week later, it doesn't have to be like in your agenda, like remind da da da, just when it comes up naturally, you tell them, and then hey, then they maybe they'll have a light bulb. Oh, hey, Claudia likes da da da, let's put her on that project. So
mm.
the being direct still works even though I'm already in my job. Yeah.
I love what you said earlier about testing. So when you were a student and you were wanting to move into sustainability and talking to some of the other students and friends, I love this notion of what can I try? And you said something about let me break it down and take one piece of it and let me go there. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit more about how you think through that? How do you even do that? And how to have a conversation with someone, say, hey, I can do this part for you, give me a chance to get some experience or try this thing or help you out. How do you
Mhm.
feel about
I think like it definitely helped that the people around me and my friends who are filmmakers had an open mind. And I think the people around you are always a reflection of you. So if you want to work with a team or want to have a network of people with open minds or people that are empathetic or people who will give you a chance, you kind of need to be that also. So I feel like that was the foundation that like my friends were like, yeah, sure. But it was also
Mhm.
that they trusted me because I did a good job with being their production designer. So it's a lot of like pre-work, like making sure you have your mind right so that the people around you will be your support system and then you support them as well. But then also like proving yourself and doing the work so that when you do want to be like, hey, I want to do this, blah, 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 they're like, I have no idea what that is, but you've done a good job and you're cool. So sure, try it. And so I'm very grateful to my one friend who she like was the first one who let me be her director of sustainability. And I worked hard. I didn't take that lightly, even though it was unpaid, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I'm gonna just do the best job ever. And then she opened up her network to me, and I was able to be a sustainability representative on like all those other short films. So yeah, definitely. And then you too, like proof of concept is important. So it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we vibe, we're friends, but it was also like, hey, Netflix does it. Hey, don't you want to be like Sony Pictures? You should do this too. This is the future. So pitching it and like showing them that it's possible and showing them examples of what they're, you know, for me, for this industry, it was checklists basically of things that the films needed to do. And so I was like, this is their list. I'm making you your custom list, and then just kind of reworking and testing that with different films. So yeah.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful because what I hear a lot of that is in internships, sometimes they're a drag, right? Sometimes they're a drag and you don't want to do some of the drudge work. But when you put yourself fully into that experience, then you can oftentimes get a lot more out of it, right? It goes, those reputations and credibility start working starting now, right? It's not like you wait for the perfect role and the perfect title and then start working hard. It's like your own core values are being developed, even in those roles that are not as glamorous, maybe.
Yes, because one thing always leads to another, and when you're early on, you're wanting to build those references, and that starts when you're, I mean, I was going to say college, but then I was going to say high school, but then I was going to say elementary, but I imagine you're all
Yes.
like,
Oh, I'd love
it
to hear
starts
that.
now, you know, or later, you know. So it's just, you have now. So if you haven't started, you can always start now with building your network and showing people that you're, I think trustworthy is maybe a through line for
Yeah.
any industry, that like you're dependable. If you say you're going to do something, you get it done. I think I would hope that's like for every industry, but I know that's true for me in this industry.
Can I ask you a question? I was just wondering when you were talking about informational interviews, and I wondered, like you talked about the 15 to 30-minute coffee talk. Um, would you suggest like that, you said something about offering value to them as well. So would you suggest that somebody do a little research on whoever they're going to meet with so that you kind of are going in with a little bit of background info and you can either ask them a question or say something that kind of lets them know that you know what they do. Did,
Yes, most
did you do
definitely.
that? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I
Okay.
had some people straight up say, you know, I don't do informational interviews anymore. I've been getting so many requests. And they had a whole like page on common questions. And I was like, oh my gosh, those were all the questions I was going to ask. So in that case,
Oh.
I didn't do an informational interview with that person, but with others, I did, made sure that
Yeah.
I wasn't just asking questions that I could have Googled, because that's a waste of
Mm,
their time.
mhm,
So, you
okay.
know, they're back, you know, having a foundation, but still, if you're curious about something specific, you can
Yeah.
ask. But then offering a perspective, I think, oh, I hit something. I think that can be beneficial because when I worked at Sony, I was on the corporate side, and we found like the people above me and laterally, we were always wondering like what things looked like to the consumer. So
Mm,
if you're a student or you're, you know, the consumer of electronics and you know, and you research something and you're like, hey, let's have an informational interview. You have the meeting and you're like, hey, I hear you're coming out with this and that. Have you thought about this? You know, they might not take your
mhm.
advice, and they might just be like, oh, well, we already thought of that. Or they might say, hey, this is a critical thinker, or
Mm,
hey, this person does their research, and it just leaves a good impression rather than you sitting with them and just being like, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that? And you
yeah.
just, you know, and then leave.
Yeah.
So
Take. And
yeah, yeah.
oh,
I love that, having the confidence to say, I am so interested in this space. What am I curious about? What am I wondering about? What can I offer? What value might I provide? Is it a perspective, an opinion? Here's a great article,
Hmm.
right? And I
Yeah.
love that because, gosh, I can imagine what that informational interview list looked like. Okay, don't reach out to me. There's a list.
Yeah.
So,
I
so you
know.
make a great point, and thank you for sharing that experience because that's learning
Mhm.
too
Mhm.
for all of us, right? How can
Mhm.
you be more intentional about being, how can you be more thoughtful when you do reach out?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also what I hear is don't take it personally, right? Like that list was for everybody, not just for you.
Mhm.
So you and the jobs that you've got, you just need the one person, right? You needed the one friend to believe in you. You needed the one offer to make. You don't need to win over 100 people. It's just going step by step, following your intuition and your instinct, doing the work, showing up prepared, being curious, being open, and letting that guide your career journey. That's really exciting.
Mhm.
What do you wish that you knew? It seems like you know a lot. What is something that you wish you knew when you were just starting off in your career that you've learned now?
Yeah. Um, I think something I wish I knew or like was more encouraged to do. I was encouraged, but I was still
Mhm.
pretty shy, is the first month to like 3 months, or let me start over. I was very shy when I went to meetings with my bosses. Um, because I was afraid that if I spoke up or if I said something, asked a question, gave an idea, that I was going to sound dumb, that I was going to sound inexperienced. So I held back a lot, and I would think of they'd be discussing, there's this issue, there's this obstacle, how do we work through it? And then in my head, I was like, what about this? What about that? But I didn't have the courage to like speak up because I was like, I'm just a trainee, which is just a fancy word for intern. And I don't really know. And then 5 seconds later, this
Someone
man
said,
says that idea. And I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I could have said it and I would have looked so smart. But now he said it and now I can't, no one's going to believe. So I would say in your first few, like whatever you say you have, like I had a 6 month traineeship, you definitely want to test the waters and see the first few weeks, like what kind of meetings are we going to? How many people are there? What are their roles? Like, is it appropriate for me to speak up? And then if it is, just do it because like again, the younger, the earlier you are in your career, the more you speak up and engage and ask questions, that is showing that you are invested and that you are engaged in what's going on.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of things I could have like sunk my teeth in sooner or been trusted with other projects sooner because they would have seen that tenacity on the outside. I had it on the inside in college and in my real life, but then at work I got so in my head and very imposter syndrome. So yes, so test the waters, I would
Mhm.
say, and then just be like, okay, this is an internal meeting, very low risk. We're just brainstorming. I'm gonna speak up. If it's a meeting with the C-suite and your boss is like, okay, keep a low profile, follow the rules. And then I would always keep a list on the side of like things to ask my manager, John, things to ask John after the meeting. And I'd have like 5 questions by the end of the meeting, and then we'd have our one-on-one. And then I would ask him because I felt comfortable. It was just he and I, and that impressed him. And then he saw like, oh, hey, next. And then he said, hey, you should bring that up next time. And then that's what gave me the courage. So I guess I just wish I already had that courage to speak up on my own. But yeah, he
I
gave me
love that.
later.
That is such a
Some-
good thing. I'm so glad this came up because you're right. There's so much pressure to have all the answers and to come up with great ideas. And I think we can all share that moment where somebody else says something that you were going to say, you were holding back. Was it good? Is it good enough? Is it good enough? And so
I
I
was
love
going to say, and women too, sometimes we tend to hold back where a man's
Out.
like, I'm just going to blurt ahead and not think about if I'm stepping on anyone's toes or talking over anyone. And
Mhm.
I really feel like we're more conscious about it. And sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it doesn't work to our advantage.
I
It's
know.
finding that balance, right?
That's so relevant because I think that's what I was feeling too, as the only young brown woman in the room. I was like, well, then, looking back, I'm like, of course, my younger self was only like 5 years ago. Like, of course, you felt a little more, guarded and just like, oh, I don't want to look dumb and silly in front of professionals who've been there for decades. So,
Mhm.
and say your idea and it might not work. They might be like, no, we can't do that. And they might move on. You can't take it personally. Usually like that's just priming yourself, conditioning yourself, because not every idea is going to work.
Yeah.
And especially, brainstorming session, most of them are not going to work. So yeah.
And that's the point. And I love that. It's not just the ideas, but something you also mentioned when you were talking about this is, I wonder about this. I wonder about that.
Mhm.
Questions,
Mhm.
right? Your curiosity and leaning on that to help everyone in the room. Somebody else had a great idea.
Mhm.
Build on that.
Yeah,
What would that look like? What
yeah.
else are we not thinking of, right? Different hats or, devil's advocate, right? Whatever you need to do to just stay curious and share some of that.
Mhm.
So some of that permission, I love what you shared about that.
Yeah. And as a young person, you have a unique perspective that they might not have depending on who you're working with. So don't be like, you old heads, but you can just say, like, from my perspective and my experience, my friends, I think, and you have a unique edge when you're starting. It might not seem like it, but they want to hear from you because or else why did they hire you? So
And
Mhm.
that context is really important sometimes too, to level set in the meeting, right? From a marketing perspective, have we considered
right.
dot, dot, dot,
Yeah.
just having some practice with that format. And that's a great way to speak to your manager about it and practice and even role play, right? What's that format? For me, something that's always been helpful is like data points. Like, here's from this research, from this, because that takes the pressure off of just of your random opinion and
Background.
grounds it. And here's the research says, here's the marketing lens, here's this.
Yeah.
Have we considered this part for the conversation?
Right.
It's
Totally.
like, be bold, but also like be aware, be aware of the surroundings so that you have the most effective approach with
Yeah.
it.
And if you don't understand something, asking early on is way better than a
Um,
year later being like, wait, I still don't fully understand this. Because that happened to me. And I was like, it was an area that I really struggled with. It was understanding the diesel side of the film industry, like never quite clicked. And I wish like earlier on, I was like, this does not make any sense to me. I wish I had been like, I need help with this. But instead, I like tried to figure it out on my own instead of like, I'm surrounded by experts. Like, yes, do your preliminary research and try to understand it. But I didn't do that next part of admitting, like, hey, I didn't learn about this in school. I've tried to research. It's not really making sense. Is it something you can help me with? Is it something I can take a course in? Is it something I can, do you know someone I could talk to about this? Versus like a year later and you're like in charge of this project and you're like, oh, okay, now I really need to know what I'm talking about and I don't really. So yeah, that's what
And
it was.
ironically, usually people really appreciate those
Yes.
direct questions, right? Like they're the expert, they are happy to share, that information that they've collected.
Mhm.
I also want to be mindful, we have few new people that have joined the call today, and so just want to open up for questions to see if anybody has any questions for you so we can take from the audience. Everyone gets shy. We'll give it a couple more minutes.
I love what you said earlier while we get some questions here, about personal branding and talking to everyone, right? And what's coming up for me is no matter where you are in the circles or you're at a party, we take for granted that maybe there are friends and family and we're not always talking about this, we're talking about other things. But how
Yeah.
powerful it is to practice, even in those settings, might be a more helpful setting to practice saying, hey, this is what I'm really interested in. And this is what I'm doing. And yeah, do you know anyone? Oh, yeah, you have a friend that works. So it might lead to other things, but there are places and spaces sometimes we forget or take for granted.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I love to having people who don't know anything about that field and then seeing what their questions might be because they might have a question on something you hadn't even considered researching or having an answer to. Very basic and remedial things, but sometimes there's pockets of industries that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, the economics behind something or whatever field they're in and maybe how that could combine with what you're doing or if they have a different perspective on it. So yeah. Oh, I see a question.
Just a simple one.
Yeah.
Because
So
you
I
seem very
worked
comfortable in your job
Oh
and
yeah,
your
I
role. So,
don't. Yeah, I worked at Sony for about 4 years after college. I'm
okay.
now a consultant
Oh, you're
in
doing this full
county.
time.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so at Sony I was a trainee and then I was
Uh-huh.
promoted to specialist,
Okay.
and I was doing that in Culver City down in LA, and then
Mhm.
I moved up to Santa Cruz County to be closer to my family and my
Mhm.
mom. And so yeah, I was at Sony for about 4 years. It was amazing though. Yeah, if my family, I always say, I hope my manager doesn't see this. If my family lived down in Southern California, I would still be at Sony. I loved
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But that leads me then into one more question. So, I mean, could you talk a little bit about that's a scary leap to make from working for a company where, your pay is guaranteed,
Yeah.
benefits, all that, to like, how did you decide to make that transition into consulting on your own?
It was kind of a no-brainer. I think a lot of my heart was with my family. A lot of things were happening and I just felt like I needed to be closer to home. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is more important than a job, yes, with the great pay and benefits and location. And it's my dream, like it was my dream to work in film and in design and all this. And so leaving that, it was tough. But then again, going back to that
Scary lean in
risk,
thing.
yeah, I'm just like, I might regret this, and in some respects, not regret, but in some respects, I'm like, hey, in another timeline, I'm still there. But right in this timeline, I'm here and this is what I'm doing. So I'm a consultant. I work for a consulting group. So
Okay,
it
you're
is
great.
still, yeah, I still have a salary and benefits and all that. So I'm not
Uh-huh.
an independent contractor by any means. But yeah, it was scary, but I made the leap. I found a job on Indeed and I turned out to love it. I feel like I've had really good luck
That's so
with,
great for you to mention just the randomness of like, yeah, I was looking at Indeed of all,
yeah,
and
yeah, not even, yeah,
it wasn't this big, scary, unimaginable process. It was like I saw it on Indeed. And
yeah, yeah. I
that's
just knew I
awesome.
had to be closer to home. And
Yeah,
then I need, environmental, I just wanted to stay in the environmental field. So that this is what I found and I'm really liking it so far. So
cool.
thank you. I think Daniel had his hand up next.
Hi. I have a quick question about, you talked about your experience and creating experiences for yourself. I guess like with this current job market where it's been, I guess, more incredibly difficult to get like an internship or a job, I
Mhm.
guess like how do you go about, let's just say, creating an experience for yourself for job applications for like the environmental industry? And I guess similarly, I guess similar how like in data analytics you create like data projects, I guess what would be like a similar thing that we can do to kind of create our own experience for, let's just say, for applying for these types of roles in the future.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on the job market front. I was really lucky that I graduated in 2019, like 9 months before the pandemic hit. So I graduated and got my job, and I've luckily been pretty set since then. So I know nowadays it's a little trickier. And yeah, with environmental, I guess, can I ask like what facet of environmental work do you want to work in? You mentioned like data analytics.
Yeah, so for me, I used to work in consulting as well, and I was on a sustainability project, but right now I'm still looking for work. But yeah, I'm still having like trouble like looking, I guess, creating projects
Yeah.
surrounding environmentalism. And I guess for me it's easier more in the data analytics aspect, but I guess for others like in this call, like if you're from a marketing background or I guess from
Yeah.
like a policy background, what types of projects can you do to, I guess, like get in that industry from like those types of niches as well?
Yeah, I would say, okay, I think I understand your question. I would try
Oh,
to get like with environmentalism and how I combined it with film, like that's so random and unexpected. I would try to use your data-driven skill set and find something that's very like niche and create your project that way. Because if you're
Okay.
doing research and data on something that there's so many papers on and so many studies, and like you're just going to add to the top of the heap of like, we've already heard about this, we already know about this. Find something that inspires you. Like for me, it was design and film and production and that, and combined it with film for your project that you want to create. What's something that's not environmental related at all that you're interested in? It can be construction, it can be fashion, it can be sports, it can be something like that. And you can do like a data, research paper on that or a data collection on that, and add that into your resume. I really like linking my projects on my resume, especially now that we're not handing in paper resumes, it's all digital. So if you have, you made a video on it, you can link your YouTube video to that. Or if you, have something on your website, you can link that as well. So hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Cool. And then I think,
Yeah, a couple of really great questions from Lily. How do you go about standing out to employers, diversifying your resume, especially with limited time?
okay, the limited time is so real because updating your resume, why does it take hours? It does. I always have my resume, like not always, but like typically try to have it open it up like once a month and see, what are you working on? Can you edit anything? Can you add anything? On LinkedIn, it's very easy. I just did it last week because I posted something and I'm like, let me see what my profile looks like. And I'm like, wait, I'm not doing any of this. And that took me like 15 minutes just to add a couple of projects that I'm working on more recently, and deleting the stuff I'm either not working on or doesn't sound as impressive anymore, or to be frank, like was filler. I can now remove that because I'm now more familiar with my current role and I can add more, substantial projects. And then the first part, standing out to employers and diversifying your resume. I've been reading a lot about like this day and age, the multi-hyphenate, like employee, not trying to say like hustle culture and you need to be a YouTuber, TikToker, professional 9 to 5 mom of 10, like more so multi-hyphenate in terms of your skill set is diverse. Like we're saying, like it's not just you're going to be a doctor in this field. It's like you have those skills, but you also maybe are very interested in marketing, or you're very interested in like consumer relations, or like other things that you're interested in, and kind of like using that to mold your resume, not mold your resume, but just add to it so that you're not just applying as an intern who just graduated. It's I I have these I'm interested in learning skills in these other areas, or yeah, I have a certificate in this other random or connected field. So yeah, I would say not pigeonholing yourself and like only laser focused on one facet of what you want to do, but look at what's around, maybe look at what's totally random and see if there's certificates or like skills you can acquire, and then putting that on your resume.
Claudia, that's so interesting too, because you sometimes our most natural and innate skills, we will overlook ourselves because we think everybody can do it, right? If we're like the oldest sibling or we were in charge of the household, like we know how to run an event, we know how to do everything, and you assume that that maybe doesn't belong on a resume, but those skills really matter. And as somebody who is hired for that, I love hiring like the oldest daughter has always been a great employee that I've had. Really interesting. And I love this question. Jenny Uribe is a college counselor at Bellarmine College Prep. She works with first generation population kids. And her question is, I've learned over the years that dreaming big is a skill. How would you encourage those who are first generation professionals to dream big and not get in their own way from pursuing their careers?
I think we set our own limits. And I think if you imagine it like a house, and you're like, or an atmosphere or something, like how high can I go? Like I'm gonna aim there. If you're only thinking in terms of a 1-story house, that's as high as you're gonna get, unless you're like some, super what is it, like a profession, what is it called when you're like a pianist who's like 8 years old that has like their skills from when they were 8, like yeah, like unless you're that, like you're not gonna reach much, you're not gonna achieve what is beyond your own limit. So you need to imagine the world is your oyster, so cliche. You need to imagine, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Like you need to imagine a skyscraper. And the fact is, you're probably not going to get all the way to the top of where you want to. Maybe not, in the next 5 years, maybe in 10 years, or maybe not ever. And that is okay. But if you don't aim high, you're gonna land somewhere a lot lower than you wanted to, or maybe wish for yourself.
Mhm. What is that? Why is that? Why do we sell
I know,
ourselves short
self-doubt.
or not
Right.
dream big enough? It's like, I hear you when you say like, it's like we stop ourselves, right? It's like we have this dream, like, well, but that's not possible.
Yeah.
What is
I
that? And
think,
how do we combat that?
yeah, I think, thank goodness it wasn't my family, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of times, like your family members and the people closest to you limit you. They tell you, you can't do this. What do you mean? You need to stay close to home. You should do this job. You can't do that. You've never done that. What are you thinking? Um, and I think I'm so grateful that like that wasn't my family and that wasn't my mom. Like she was like, go wherever you want, study whatever you want, do whatever you need to do. And now I'm hoping there's more people like me that can talk to young people like we're doing here
Mhm.
and tell you like you don't need to listen to your if that's your family, you don't need to listen to them. Um, it can be tricky if you're still living at home or if they're, paying for your schooling, but just know that there are more avenues and more, places you can reach than what's being brought upon you or that what's being, projected back to you.
I love that. I have this visual when you talked about the one-story house and you get to the top and then maybe you're sitting on the roof and you're looking around and there's a skyscraper over there and there's a three-story over there. But you're right, sometimes we're limited by our own experiences. So when our family maybe shares, it's because they got to the roof and that's as far as, and so it's a personal perspective and we know they want the best for us, but it's up to us individually to imagine the skyscraper and go there and just
Yeah.
start at the first floor and see how far you go.
Yeah.
Like,
And you can always rebuild, like you can add to your roof, your
Yes,
house.
Legos.
Yes.
you can always rebuild. Just keep thinking of Moana. No one goes beyond the reef, and it is so, as much as our families love us, sometimes their limiting beliefs can impart on ours. And so you're right. At some point, you just need permission to dream and build without those voices, those external voices.
Yeah, and understanding that, they most likely they love you for who you
For
are and they
sure.
want what's best for you. And, you should, I would, hold space for them and be like, I understand where you're coming from. And if it comes to like, you want to do this dream, you're like, but you might need a safety net to come back to, like establishing like, hey, I'm going to try this. Are you going to be a type of person that I can come back to? And
Mhm.
establishing that. And if they're like, this is really hard for us, but yes, do it. And you can always come back. That's great. But if not, you need to be smart. You can't just jump, and not have a plan B. I'm a planner. So if your family is not going to be your support system, you need to find another support system because it can be scary. I don't want you guys to leave this and be like, I'm going to move to Australia and just, you do need to be smart with it and have a system in case you need to fall back. If that's not people, finances, that's always important. If you're going to move and you can't afford it and you need to start over and yeah, college, you want to go to college and somewhere else. And yeah.
And
Mhm.
even somebody like Jenny, I think you mentioned she's at Bellarmine. And so if she has people in those roles have an opportunity to speak to parents, to start to sometimes it's better to hear stuff from people who are not your family. You could talk to them, but they're still your kid. Whereas if you're hearing it from someone else, people in the community who are addressing parents of children who are still going through school, I think that could be, open their mind a little bit,
Yeah,
hopefully.
yeah, definitely. I know I don't have kids, but I can imagine like that's your baby, like you want to protect them. So
Yeah, yeah.
I do feel for the parents as
Well, and
well.
I was thinking about what you said about like not just, often if you share if your family is willing. If you can share your plan with your family, then they kind of go, oh, he or she has thought this through, and they're not just out there going blindly. They've done their research. Okay, I'm not super comfortable with it. Who knows, right? We never know. Maybe we're not giving them enough credit to come around to things.
Yeah, and that's part of the branding yourself. That includes your family and your parents. And then, they might look at you and be like, but you wanted to be something else last year, and now you're
Yeah,
changing
right.
it. You never know what's going to happen, but just be open.
Open and permission to dream big, right? I feel like more people just need to hear it from different voices. And
Yes.
I'm so grateful that you are talking with us. And I hope you talk to like a million other groups of people,
Agree.
because it's such a wonderful way that you have approached this early career, with such authenticity. And it feels like when you are in alignment, then you feel, you suffer less when you're just in your own alignment. And people don't get that message enough. They live their life externally or for other people or for other factors and thinking that's what's going to bring me success. And most of the time that's when they have to, pivot when they get to their
Reevaluate. Yeah.
they're like, what have I done this whole time? So what a blessing. I'm really encouraged that the millennials and the Gen Zers coming up are way more authentic and grounded than the Gen Xers and the boomers were, right? That
Right.
they are living a different trajectory. And that's really empowering for everyone. Are there any other questions? I want to be cognizant of your time too, Claudia. And how cool, right? That I don't know, we talked a lot about your sustainability interest, but I'm just curious about your interest in film. Where did that come from?
Let's see. To be frank, I wanted to
Yeah.
go into theater. I was a stage manager in high school,
Oh.
and I love the live show element of theater. But I didn't feel like it was a very lucrative industry. So I was like, what's the closest thing to theater is film and TV production. So I majored in that, and I'm not like a movie buff by any means. Like I don't know directors by their names or anything. I enjoy watching and analyzing films a lot. But I'm always most drawn to environments, and just I feel like my environment has always impacted the way I feel. So I try to make, with my apartment and like places I've lived. So that was always kind of been in me since I was young. And that's how I got into production design, which is like, looking at a script, seeing what is this character like? What do they, how did they grow up? What is their personality like? What does their house look like? Or, other sets. So that's what I studied in film, in college. But then, yeah, then I took a different turn. But even now, I'm still like, I love home renovation shows. I can watch it. It just doesn't come like I'm not the artist to draw it out. Yeah, I feel like I just have a good eye.
Yeah, you do. It looks like a Pinterest background in the back. I love it. I
Yeah, we
love
saw your cat sit up
Oh,
for a
you did?
minute in the basket, turn around, and go back down to sleep. It's cute.
it. It's
Nature.
great. Well, we
Yeah.
have just a few more minutes left. So if it's okay, we'll go into some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Okay. And just first response. No need to overthink or to give too much detail. This is just your first response.
Okay.
Dead or alive, who is your hero?
I would say my two heroes are my uncle's Abel, my uncle Ruben, my hero.
What is the most interesting project you've ever worked on?
Installing a renewable diesel tank on the Sony Pictures lot.
Wow.
Impressive.
I left before it was finished. I don't even know where it landed, but that was interesting.
Wow. It sounds really interesting. What's a song that always makes you feel nostalgic when you listen to it?
Probably like anything by T-Pain. I'm a
Mhm.
millennial. I was in elementary when it was like the peak 2000s, so not old enough,
That's
but
your
I wanted to
jam.
be older.
Yeah, that's good. I know that feeling. That's a good feeling. When you go to a menu, when you go to a restaurant, what's your favorite dessert on the menu?
Dessert like chocolate molten lava cake. Like, oh man.
Ooh, classic. Good one. Where's somewhere in the world that you would like to travel and visit that you've not been yet before?
I'm so ashamed as a Mexican, Honduran American. I haven't been to Mexico yet, my motherland. I need to go. Yeah.
That's awesome. Mexican, Honduran. That's good. I like the mix. I'm Salvadorian and Bolivian, but I'm in
Oh,
San Jose, so I don't get a lot of mixes.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Here. I know. I've never met anyone else that's half Salvadorian, half Bolivian, so I'll keep my eye out and for Mexican, Honduran mix too.
Yeah.
Claudia, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, and for your wisdom. What remarkable wisdom. I wish I had half of your wisdom at that point in my career. It is remarkable. And thanks for being generous with your gifts and sharing it with all of our Kira members. We
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
of course. Always happy to share and happy to help. So thank you so much for inviting me.
You bet. We will
Be
keep in very
well.
close touch.
Yes.
Bye.
You take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Fun.